Welcome to the Decent People podcast, a production of Decentral Media, where we're committed to telling the stories of the founders, builders, and visionaries who are creating a new decentralized economy and internet experience. You guys know it as Web3 or blockchain, and we're going to bring you the smartest and most interesting people in the space for intimate conversations that reveal their background, how they got into crypto in the first place, and what they're doing today to make a decentralized future a reality. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure to check out our site at decentral.io. Now, to the show.
Welcome back to another episode of the Decent People podcast by Decentral Media. I'm your host, Stephen Ladden. This week, we have the creator of the Web3 media company, Probably Nothing, Jeremy Fall. Jeremy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, our pleasure. Thank you for joining. Just to dive in, creating a Web3 media company, was that something young Jeremy ever could imagine creating as a kid? Is that something you've always been passionate about before probably Web3 was Web3? How did it all come to be?
So, yeah, I mean, I entered the space very early on. I had sold my restaurants as a former chef restaurateur. I sold my restaurants in 2019, and I entered the space. And I really got attracted to the communities that were being built on Twitter, right? I felt like kind of this like underground scene that like no one knew about as the pandemic and people really connecting. And there was a lot of stuff going on Clubhouse and Twitter. And so, for me, I was like, wow, this really reminds me of community building around food. I used food as a conduit to conversation. Building communities, bringing people together through food is very similar on how people were coming together through this creative medium, which was NFTs. And at this time, really was mostly used from an art standpoint, not really a technological standpoint, like we're seeing now with like, sports and all these things. It was really based off of PFP, this like very tribal type of identity that people were using it for. So like, this is really cool. Became a fan of the space before becoming a creator of it. And what I realized with time going forward is I was like, this is going to be really hard for people to achieve mass adoption. I'm pretty tech savvy, but a lot of people aren't, and this is going to be really hard for them to really adopt. So also I have a ton of Web2 connections, with like the Warner Records of the world and all those. How do I help them do this the right way? And essentially what I notice is Web2 people trying to do Web3 their way didn't work. Web3 people trying to do Web2 their way or integrate Web2 their way didn't work. The space needed a bridge. So that's where Probably Nothing comes in. It is an educational brand at the core, but we don't brand it as education because education comes off intimidating to a lot of people. They're like, education, learning, it can be intimidating. So we're like, let's build a cool brand, like you would build a streetwear brand, and use it to attract people and then connect them to projects. Like we just did a drop with Warner Records and Bose called Stickman Toys that was free and gave you IP rights to your design and your audio. That is a great way to have people onboard into the space. We onboarded thousands of people into the space that way because they're like, oh, I identified to this. How do I get it? Okay, cool. XYZ step. All they had to do is pay for gas, which was like $9. They're very happy. Now they have crypto on their wallet. They have an NFT. Now they've entered the space. So for us, it's like connecting those emotional dots for people to enter it, but then not where they're just downloading an app that just stays unused in their phone, where they're actually becoming active members of the community.
Essentially, as you said, you're building a community around NFTs instead of food, roughly.
Exactly.
And so how impactful is that background in food when you're building the community and the thought you're putting into it? Is there an overlap in terms of the energy you would put into running a restaurant versus what you're doing now?
It's funny because Discord is very similar to a restaurant because you've got like your technical people, your mods, which are like, your mods are kind of like your floor, right? Your managers and everything. You've got like coders, they're kind of like the kitchen and everything. You've got like, and you got a lot of people complaining about shit. And, you have to like feed the people. It's like almost like, we'll offer you a glass of champagne at the bar sort of thing. It's like, how can we make your day better? Like, it's a lot of that. It feels like the organization of running a restaurant for me, and like I'm hosting and I'm the face of it or whatever it is. So, and people are like, wow, I'm not used to being in a business where like everything you do is publicly criticized. I'm like, I come from Yelp, the Yelp world. Like that's where all my, and it's like, people don't realize how like what it does to you to read about a Yelp review or about Discord comment, whatever it is, So I'm used to that. And I think that's served me well, I'm used to being in a business where you see people consume what you create in real time and react to it. Not like printing t-shirts you ship in, you have no idea, right? Which could be both an advantage and disadvantage. Disadvantage on the mental health capacity, but an advantage in the sense that like you're able to correct things in real time. You're able to really connect with the consumers on a deeper level because you follow them from, there's a full exchange. You follow them from like the point of purchase, and then after that, and you're able to communicate with them directly. So I see it as a big advantage. And since I come from that world, it's easy for me to navigate it.
And in terms of navigating that world, you start probably nothing. Was there an initial experience or a set of experiences that led you to realize, hey, we're onto something here? Like you've had an initial success that was revelatory in the sense that, oh, hey, actually what we're doing here is actually going to stick around for a minute. This isn't just a fly-by-night operation.
Yeah, I mean, look, we hit 30,000 followers in like the first few days, which was pretty crazy. We were lucky that this was right before Instagram changed the algorithm for the 1,000th time, which is annoying as shit for us. But honestly, like it was cool because I don't base our success on followers or anything like that, even though our following grows drastically. I really base it on like shares, like not comments, not likes, shares, bookmarks, which is like a very underrated form of engagement because it's not public, so people don't care about it as much. But I go in and look at the analytics, I'm like, wow, so we posted some news and it was shared 2,000 times. That means that at the very least 2,000, because that was curated for people's inboxes from someone they know, right? So 2,000, we were able to spread this to 2,000 people who I'm assuming for the most part don't follow us if they're sharing it, or let's just say even at least half. But that's what was really interesting to me, is seeing like how people are interacting with something that they don't understand yet. So the way we tailor our news is it's very, very visually pleasing. So that's step one. It makes you want to read it, interact with it. We look at it as very heavy on the design standpoint. The articles are broken down usually into 3 paragraphs. 1 is introductory, so you get an idea of it. 2 is for you to get a little bit more info. And the 3rd is really like for the deeper crypto heads, like to be able to like add something that no one else does. So there's mechanics to it for sure. But it's interesting because the way we are on Twitter and the way we're on Instagram, it's like 2 different worlds. Like we cater to these people on this side, and on Twitter, we're like, super hot brand that's like a lot of degens, and we're helping like degens get into projects that are like, again, by the Warner Records and the CNNs of the world, like our drop today with CNN, like we're doing that. And on one side, we're educating. So, our whole thing is building this ecosystem to be able to like drop things, educate people, and essentially being like a one-stop shop for that and be able to connect them to the right projects. And so, all those different parts, although they work independently, they do work together for one common goal. So that's always like what we're trying to push, is really making sure that like it's a 2-way street, the same way Web3 is. We're not getting information. It's like we're empowering you to educate other people. So you're helping out. We're only one army, right? Like we want to empower like thousands of people to onboard people. That's how we're going to get mass adoption. It can't be just us.
When you mentioned doing a job with CNN, what goes into a drop? What creatively, what goes into that, and what's that process like?
Yeah, so the CNN one that dropped today actually is a good example. So I actually personally designed it. I did an art piece, 250 editions, and it inspired by Nelson Mandela's release from prison in 1990, which was cool. 1990 is actually my year of birth, and so I did the 250 editions. CNN has archival footage of Nelson Mandela's release on CNN, and 250 editions, people will be able to own that footage, and they can own my art piece. And then we did that as a collaborative drop.